Hello everyone, my name is Tuomas Mattsson and
I am Sebastian Nyholm.
And we're here to tell you a little bit about the trainings that we offer here at Vaadin. So, we have a bunch of slides here from the trainings themselves. We'll be showing some exercises as well. And just to give you a little bit of a feel of what they contain, why would you want to join a training, and so forth. So, without any further ado, we'd just like to cover the courses actually. Me and Seba have been holding these for many years already?
Quite a few years, yes.
We've been here for 7-8 years, both of us, and we've been doing training since the beginning. So let's just talk about what these actual courses are about then.
Sure. So the framework course, this course is meant for someone who is familiar with Java, but really hasn't had a chance to learn about Vaadin yet. The aim of the course is to get you up to speed quickly and make you a productive developer as fast as possible. In the course, we talk about pretty much the fundamental features of Vaadin and how you can get the maximum efficiency out of them. The next course we have is the best practices course, and this course is meant for developers who already know about Vaadin but want to develop production-grade software with it. So we talk about how you structure your code to make it more testable, maintainable, and robust. We also talk about the architecture of the framework itself. Do you want to tell a little bit about the client side, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. So the client-side course is for those people who already know the basics of the framework. They've been developing on the server side for a while already, but they want to do more. They want to learn how to make their own components on the client side, for instance. They want to learn how to integrate third-party JavaScript components or libraries such as jQuery or any basically JavaScript components that you can find on the internet. There's a lot of those these days. That's only one day, and then we have the last course, the Java EE course, which is the basics of Java EE. The course is a little bit different than the rest of the ones here. So in the Java EE course, we mostly cover the basic functionality of Java EE. So we'll talk about beans and CDI and so forth. We'll also, of course, cover how to use this with Vaadin as well. But it's more of a Java EE fundamentals course than a Vaadin course, which the rest of these are.
Yep.
So we'll be taking a look at each of these in turn now, just a couple of example slides and exercises. We're gonna drop the Java EE course from the list though, because if you want Java EE, you probably know that already, and you'll know pretty much what it covers as well. But from the other courses, let's take a look what we have. So, an example slide here from the very first course, the framework course. And as Seba here covered already, there's a lot of really basic stuff. So how components work, how layouting work, for instance. So here's how a Vaadin layout works. This is actually a vertical layout. So it's an example on how you can position components inside a vertical layout. Of course, the slide is just picked from a bunch of other slides, so it's a little bit out of context here, but just as an example on what kind of material you'll see. So here we place two buttons inside a vertical layout, and what happens is the vertical layout actually assigns two slots to these components and positions them thusly, and then you can additionally move the buttons around according to these anchor points, which is called component alignment. So we can move the button, for instance, to the right here. Another example of the slides, data binding. Here is an example on how the Vaadin data model is actually built. So there's 3 levels of data binding. There's containers and items and properties, and this slide here visualizes how those are presented in a table, for instance. So that's just a quick look. The course covers a lot of other things as well. But would you like to show us an exercise maybe?
Absolutely. So this is another exercise that we do in the fundamentals course. And the idea in this exercise is to teach you how you can bind your data beans directly to your Vaadin fields and use them through that. So the end result is a form, which is pretty typical for your applications, where you can fill in some information and then update your underlying data bean by either committing the data or just directly modifying it depending on the situation. In our case, we decide to update the bean based on a save action, and at that point the entire bean gets updated at once, so we don't have to individually update each field. And we also teach you how this can be used to create a sort of a rollback functionality. So if I change this to something else, I can actually use a discard method to roll back the data to whatever it was previously in the bean. And looking at the code, we can see that there's a few different classes needed, which is, for instance, the bean itself, which is in our case a product bean. And then we have two different components that are bound here. So we have the layout that displays everything, which is this one, and we describe how to use the field group to create this sort of a bind together with the data bean. We also then describe, for instance, how to use it to create your forms and then decide which fields of the bean should be bound to which Vaadin fields. And this is basically how the exercise works. In the fundamentals course, there are about 10 to 11 exercises and maybe a bonus task depending on the day.
Do you have to code everything from scratch in these?
You do not. In many of these cases, at least in the fundamentals course, we actually provide some sort of stub code so that it's easy to get started and you get a sort of a kickstart to these exercises. And that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a good idea we found for people that are just getting started with Vaadin. They might not be interested in the thing that gets generated for them anyway. They just want to know how the components actually work and how the data binding should be done and what methods to call when.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. That's it for the framework course here. Of course, there's a lot more in the course. It covers 2 days. And after that, you really know how the basic functionalities of the framework actually work. And it's very easy to get started building an application and UIs after that course. Yep. So let's take a look at some other slides from the next course. So we have the best practices slides, or the best practices course, and here's some example slides from that. This slide set here is ripped from the application lifecycle set. So we go through what parts are there in the application lifecycle actually. So how does the session work? How does the servlet work? What's a Vaadin service? How do you get access to these? How do they communicate with each other? So basically more advanced stuff. Also, as the name implies, we cover a lot of best practices in how to build your actual Vaadin applications. But this slide here shows you how different Vaadin servlets inside the same WAR file actually live with each other and how they communicate. So we have a WAR file here, we have an HTTP session, and we deploy a Vaadin servlet. That creates a Vaadin session, which creates Vaadin UIs. But we can also add another servlet into the same WAR file. This level at least, so you can very easily put your Vaadin servlet inside your legacy application and have both running at the same time, and even share the HTTP session. So as you can see here, the HTTP session that underlines everything is actually common for each of these servlets, so you can share data between the applications.
Okay.
What about an example of an exercise from the best practices course?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the course also covers on how we should structure our applications to make them maintainable. So this example or exercise we have here is basically a project which has been written with haste. So basically the deadline drew closer and closer and we just had to get something released.
That doesn't really sound realistic, does it?
No, that would never happen, right? So this is a project where we have a few different views. We have some data that is being shown in these views. And the task for our trainees is to take this code, which used to be bundled into one file, one class, just bunch together all of the code, and take it and split it up into different types, into a presenter, into a view, and later on into a model. So this just shows us how to structure our code and where to put the UI code, where to put our backend calling logic and all of our logic code and so forth. The good part about this course is also that for this part of the course, we start with one application and we continue modifying that same application in multiple exercises so that you sort of get a good grasp on how things are done. And at the end, you end up with a product that is well written and nicely modular and maintainable.
Yeah, it's a good practice that we use actually in-house as well. We use many of the patterns introduced in this course in our own in-house project.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, thank you. So we have one course left to cover. As I said, the Java EE course is a topic on itself, so we won't cover that. But the client-side course is actually quite interesting in many ways. As I said, it's for those people who already know the basics of the server side in the Vaadin framework. So they know how to use layouts, how to use buttons and everything. They know how the UI class itself works. But there's more to Vaadin than that. If you want to create more complex applications, maybe more complex components, you often have to delve into the client side. So what actually runs inside the browser. And here's an example slide from the client-side course where we explain how Vaadin components are actually built, how they work in the framework. So there's two parts to every component. There's the server part, which is down here in green, and then there's the browser part, which is on the top in blue. On the server side, we have the button class, and the button class also has a shared state and then some RPC methods. On the browser side, we have a vButton class, and there's a button connector, and there's the shared state and RPC calls as well. So the course in this section covers how these different classes relate to each other. What's the responsibility of which one? Which should you use in which situation? So, of course, the vButton class is not something that you will ever use while doing server-side programming. But if you're doing client-side programming, you want to basically create a more complex component that might have a button, then you might use the vButton class. Also, of course, the communication between the server and client side is pretty thoroughly gone through there in the course. So we have the shared state mechanism, we have the RPC invocations, very deeply going into how they actually work and how you should use them.
Yep.
All right. Let's take a look at a very popular question that we get asked a lot. How do you create a text field that only accepts numbers?
Yeah. So this is one of the components that we often get asked about, but we don't actually have in the Vaadin core at the moment. So it is basically a text field which only accepts numbers as an input. So unfortunately, there's not much to see. I can only input numbers here. But this is a way for us to make this check on the client side so that the user so that you don't have to send the information to the server, validate that the data there, but instead the user will get instantaneous feedback on this input. And the way we structure it is that we create, as Thomas mentioned, we create our own connector. We make it sure that it extends a text field connector so that we know that we're working with a text field. And then we add some functionality on top of the pre-existing text field component. And this basically just creates a list of accepted key codes or accepted input characters. And then we check it on the client side. Is the user input part of the allowed key codes or not? It's actually a very simple widget that we create, but it's a very commonly requested feature. And then we also show you how you can bind this to the server side and make it work, use it from the server. When you've created this component, you can easily take this and extend the functionality to allow any type of input that you choose. So everything you learn in this client-side course is easily modifiable and extendable to add more functionality to your applications. I think that's what I had about the client side.
Excellent. So, the question, of course, that you're all thinking about, where can I get to these awesome courses? They are awesome, trust me on this.
I agree.
Vaadin.com/training has a list of all the trainings that Vaadin provides, both online and on site. We do courses all over the world. We have a Vaadin expert typically travels to your location, and we do a whole week of training. So there's typically 2 or 3 courses all bunched up during that 1 week, and you can enroll to all of them if you want to. This particular week, we have 20% off all trainings. So if you sign up online, so if you're interested in trainings and want to give it a go, then I strongly recommend you to take advantage of this offer. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. One thing that I forgot to mention, of course, we do have courses here, but how do you know, or how do your colleagues know that you've actually gone through the courses and know that you know more than they do? Well,
that's important.
That's very important sometimes. We actually have course certificates for each course. So when you've gone through a course and you've completed it, we add you to a list on the website which lets you take the course exam.
Yep.
And when you've done that exam, there's a bunch of questions about the content of the course. And when you've done that and passed, then you get a very nice certification for that you can print and hang up on your wall.
Yep. And typically, if you pass all of these courses with flying colors, it should be pretty easy for you to also get the Vaadin Certified Developer certification if you so choose, because the material we teach here is, well, very useful for that also.
The courses that we have here cover pretty much all the normal use cases of Vaadin. So from the very basics, which is the Vaadin framework course, what is a component? How do you actually use a component? To how do you build your application? And then how do you extend widgets? How do you create your own set of components if you really need them to?
And how one other thing that is very popular is in the client-side course, we also teach you how you can integrate existing JavaScript libraries into your Vaadin application. So maybe you want to use something like jQuery or something else in your
that's
Vaadin
usually
application.
very popular.
Yeah.
Or a very popular question that we get asked a
Yes.
lot. But that's it for us from here in Turku. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.